We are back. Are we live? We live? I think we're live here, guys. Yes, it looks like we are. Cool. Welcome back, everyone. I think I went live a minute early, but who cares? Going over the corners today. Miami Dolphins corners group continuing going through like the previews for training camp, going position by position. Getting towards the end of it, but yeah, definitely going to go through the corners. I think overall, pretty quality group for the Dolphins, especially if you feel comfortable with your top two. Jalen Ramsey, one of the best corners in the league, and then Kendall Fuller, I think, brings together to be a pretty solid duo. Plus, I think this is a position they've upgraded at. I think Fuller has been better than Howard the past few years, and they got Fuller on a cheaper deal than what they were paying Howard. So all around, really like that Kendall Fuller move. And then behind that is where you kind of have your question marks, and I think pretty big, like, can Cam Smith step up, be that third guy, or do they just keep Ramsey and Fuller on the outside? Because I've talked about Ramsey a lot being like the Kyle Hamilton for this team, a guy that will be moved around a lot. Use how Kyle Hamilton was, but Hamilton was more of a safety that moved around a ton, while Ramsey's more of a corner that will move around. And if you're going to be moving Ramsey around, I'd rather have a guy like Cam Smith on the outside than Kohu, because I think Kohu can still be a solid nickel. Like, Dolphins have multiple players on the team that I think can be solid nickels. Even their starting outside guys like Ramsey and Fuller both have great experience playing within the nickel, so I'm not too worried about the nickel position. It's being able to have the third corner outside of Fuller and Ramsey that can play on the outside at a consistent level, and I think that's where Cam Smith steps up. Then you're feeling really, really, really strong about the position. How many total pick six this season? I'm gonna guess. Let's go 3. Be optimistic. That's pretty good. But also, yeah, all around, feel pretty good about the defensive back room. You have guys who I feel like are pretty locked to make the team, and then you have someone like an Ethan Bonner who we'll talk about, who I think is like really on that roster bubble right now. I hope Ethan Bonner sticks around, but just like looking at the numbers, really trying to like see who's gonna make it. He is kind of teetering. He has to beat out maybe a Nick Needham, or they could keep both. I don't really see any of the UDFAs making it unless of injuries happening. Those guys are practice squad potential guys, so we'll talk about later. But Ramsey, one of the keys to the defense. You go look at that Baltimore defense. The keys were Roquan Smith and Kyle Hamilton, and to me, I know people will look at Javon Holland to do some of the Kyle Hamilton stuff, which I do think he will. I think it will be a team effort of guys moving around. I think it will depend on matchup too. But I really think Ramsey is more of that guy who can play the Hamilton role at the same level as Hamilton. There's not many guys that can. And to me, it's like Jordan Brooks is going to have to be a Roquan kind of that role. And I think he actually fits that role pretty well too. So they're going to be very, very, Ramsey's so important if he ends up playing those Hamilton snaps, which I am expecting him to, honestly. Okay. But yeah, Ramsey, still a beast, still a dog. Corner is one of these positions. I think when you look at their roster, it's also a position I think they could add to in the future. Like when you look at like the next year's sort of draft, because Fuller's on a 2-year deal, so even though Fuller will be here next year, usually like you're looking like 2 years ahead. So when you would go into the next year, that's what it would be. From a data standpoint, any idea how many seconds after snap when an interception occurs? I actually don't have that off the top of my head. I'm sure I could look it up and find that. It definitely would be intriguing. I wonder if there's like the correlation between any like certain things when interceptions occur. Definitely an interesting thing to think about. But I imagine it's they average around the same. But yeah, finishing up about Jalen Ramsey. He's the corner that can really do it all. I think if you've watched Ramsey since he came out of Florida State, like he played safety in college, I think he can still do some of that stuff. When you go look at like his final couple years in the Rams, they really allowed his versatility to shine, and it's so important within this scheme. And I think that's where that's why I was said last year, I thought Phillips was the most impactful player on the Dolphins defense last year. While I think Ramsey was probably up there for most impactful, the way he was used didn't, fully use his skill set to his advantage. Teams were able to avoid him, so I think being able to move Ramsey around as just a defensive weapon, a defensive piece. I think that's one of the things that excites me most about the new scheme is we're going to see Ramsey skill set utilized to the full potential. That's like probably one of my favorite things looking forward to the season, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Fuller, another guy that actually Fuller is very interesting to me because he's kind of been an underrated player, I think, in this league for a while. Definitely a good scheme fit too. I would say a better probably at his worst in press man and like coverage wise, like he's very good in zone and like off man coverages. Very instinctive, good feel for leverage type of player. Which, he's gonna have to do a bunch of. Let me see. Go back here. Fuller. Here's Fuller picking off Josh Allen, bottom of the screen. Playing some quarters, basically matched up on Gabe Davis. Really good like leverage maintenance. They try to hit him with a double move. Good anticipation, good field, not overplaying it too, trying to jump for it. Stays square because he's ready to break on this, but he doesn't overcommit that first move. So then he opens up his hips, gets back over the top, upfield shoulder. And then when he gets, I love that he understands his positioning, ball skills too, because when he's in this position, like look, high upfield shoulder, that's what they call this type of positioning, upfield shoulder. If he was on this side of Davis, he'd be on, low field shoulder. When you're upfield shoulder like this, you turn into the receiver to locate the ball, which he does. So like that, usually a back shoulder would come, and he still has to turn around, go find it, attack the ball. Big fan of the Kendall Fuller signing. I thought that was one of the more surprising deals. Like a lot of the other ones like were expected position wise, and it was this was one of those moves that I was like, oh, I wasn't even thinking about adding a corner of that caliber. Just because I didn't think cap wise we were going to go for that. But they got Fuller on a cheaper deal than expected, and definitely a really big fan of that move. Also in the past, like he started out his career, he's very intriguing because he started his career as like one of the best nickels in the league. And he's like barely played nickel the past few years, pretty much primarily on the outside, and has been a very like a top 15 outside corner. So a guy that if they needed to could go back and play the nickel snaps. Dolphins have multiple guys that could do some nickel work, like Ko, who's a strict nickel, Needham, who I will talk about a little bit, who's probably going to be more part of the safety group, but also is more of a nickel corner throughout his career. And even some of the other guys, some of the safeties have some nickel experience on the roster. But let me move this real quick. Cool. Love your work, brother. Keep it up. Thank you, FinHub. Appreciate that. Just excited for the season to come, and then definitely we'll kick it into overdrive. Really waiting for training camp. Obviously, is going to be great, and then preseason when we get to see some of the guys in action for the first time, some of the younger guys, and we get to see maybe how certain guys look in the new scheme, things like that. That'll be interesting. Ramsey, Fuller, very confident in those two. Don't have too many questions as them as players. We kind of know who they are at this point in their careers, and they're both going to be very important to the Dolphins' success if they stay healthy, which is really nice. I think after this is where you get into some of the question marks. A player I really liked coming out of college, Cam Smith, South Carolina. I'm a fan of what, of him as a player. Didn't really get to play a lot in year one, which was unfortunate. I think, some of the politics kind of played into that, specifically because the defensive coordinator was not a big fan of him, which is, not the greatest. And, there's been questions about maybe being a diva or something like that. I don't know. I'm not going to, put too much stock into that stuff because, that's all just hearsay. But Cam Smith on the film, just looking at his film as a player, I asked you to Phillips chop Kamara, meaning extra pressure, fast print, all this cause more interceptions than Fuller. Oh yeah. Sean, that's a good point. Whenever there's more pressure like created, I think and I don't think like how they track it is by the seconds, which was how you phrased it. But yeah, that's definitely another way to look at it. It's just the pressure rate. I think, the higher the pressure, just the higher the turnovers, not even necessarily interceptions. But yeah, there's definitely that correlation. So good point made. They go hand in hand. I think having a good secondary can really help your pass rush get to it, or having a good pass rush can help your secondary with the timings of things. But yeah, to continue talking about Cam Smith as a player coming out of South Carolina, really quick twitch player, instinctive. I think you got to see a little bit of that going into the preseason last year. He looked really good in that first preseason game. I think he was injured and didn't really play the second one. And then the third preseason game, he got like beat by a double move. And I feel like that just kind of maybe Fangio did give him a chance after that. So like in his limited work, I do think, yeah, he can be a little over aggressive. He's willing to come down and get some big hits too. But his like closing speed, quick twitch, I think instincts, he actually kind of has a little bit, I feel like, of a Kendall Fuller type skill set. Like that doesn't like surprise, like they're not the same body types, but similar like twitch and instincts at times. So I could see Smith being able to play on the outside this year. Hopefully that's kind of my dream for the secondary. Specifically looking at corners is Fuller on the outside. Then when you're going into nickel, which is basically base nowadays in the NFL, so you have 3 corners on the field, you're moving Ramsey around as your defensive weapon. So sometimes he'll be on the outside, sometimes he'll be on the inside as like a slot, maybe even down in the box. And then Cam Smith is that third corner who will play a lot on the outside while you're having Ramsey move all around the field, just to be like a matchup piece for you. And then you have like Hall and Poyer, and then Marcus May as your 3 safeties, depending on the different sets. And then Kohu will be like your 4th corner, but will play only really nickel. So like if you have Ramsey and Fuller on the outside in certain games, then Kohu will play significant snaps in the nickel. Because I think Kohu had a down year last year, but he was like most of his like down plays, like really bad plays when he had to play on the outside. And I don't think he was the best scheme fit for Fangio stuff. Definitely looked better in the Flores system. And just he played like mostly nickel that year. So if he's playing strictly nickel, I feel better about Kohu as a player. And then Cam Smith, I think, is going to take that second year jump. And I feel like he's going to get his shot now in this new scheme. Fangio's not holding him back. And I feel like Greer's going to try to push for him to get playing time as that third guy. And I liked him as a player coming out of the draft. Was definitely a fan. Sometimes, people, have different timelines when it comes to development. And, sometimes there's exterior factors that play into it, like, your coach. But yeah. He will get his hands on the ball. Yeah, I agree, Michael. Definitely a ball hawk type player. Dolphins have some pretty good ball hawks in the secondaries, guys who have experience getting hands on the ball. Yeah, like me some Cam Smith. Here's Kohu playing on the outside right here, but like I feel like this is what Kohu does best, whether he's on the outside or in the nickel. It doesn't really matter. It's him breaking up screens. I feel like that is Kohu at his best. Like he's one of the best. I think DBs versus the screen game in the NFL, like that's where like all of his highlights come from, which is always nice to see. Instinctive plays near the line of scrimmage. He'll fill in versus the run too. Those are kind of where he makes his splash plays. And I do think Kohu is better in man to man. Like if even you go back watch his undrafted rookie season stuff, lots of good film from the man to man. Even like covering players like Garrett Wilson pretty consistently. But in the Fangio stuff, playing in like the, that zone match stuff, I think he looked a little more uncomfortable, and it was a little. I think they put a lot on the players' plates. I think one thing the Dolphins struggled with a lot last year was communication in the secondary. So I think, hopefully they can get that cleaned up. I think adding Poyer is big for that. I even think adding like Jordan Brooks as a linebacker is big for communication at that second level, because he's a good communicator at the second level. Poyer will help a ton because there were so many miscommunications last year, especially between I feel like Kohu and Elliott had a lot of miscommunications, like when they were communicating together. So hopefully that can take a step up in this new system. But yeah. Yeah, talked about, yeah. But just to finish up on Cam Smith and Kohu, because I feel like they're the next 2 up, in my opinion, after Ramsey and Fuller. Ramsey and Fuller are obviously your top 2. And then Cam Smith and Kohu are kind of the next 2 up, but Kohu will be like the next up nickel, and Cam Smith, I think, will be the next up outside guy. And I have faith in both of them, honestly. I feel pretty solid about Kohu as a strictly nickel. If he has to play on the outside, I would have my concerns. And I think Cam Smith will take that next jump. I do like his film. Sometimes with these guys that didn't work out as rookies, usually I wasn't a huge fan of them coming out of college. I was like maybe 50-50 on them, but I was a big fan of Cam Smith, so I still have pretty good faith in him. Definitely wouldn't give up on him yet. And then we'll talk a little bit about Nick Needham. Nick Needham, he's kind of the guy, like big versatility. Versatility is pretty. I think that's how he probably like has a really because I don't think Nick Needham's like guaranteed to make the roster, but I would say he's very likely because of his versatility. One, versatility. Now he's going to be 2 years off the season-ending injury that he had, which I think is big for him, and the versatility will be key for him making the roster, being able to play the safety spots, the nickel, because I think he will be working probably more with the safety group. But then he would probably have to beat Elijah Campbell. But when they look at the DB group as a whole, they might be like, okay, Needham gets that last roster spot because he can play multiple different things for us. Or if he doesn't make the roster, I feel like you could probably just get Needham on your practice squad, but he would be one of those guys, if he was on your practice squad, he would get elevated. So hopefully coming off the injury, you can kind of see him return to like the form we saw him in like a few years ago when he was a little more active. People kill Smith with that double move, and there's rookie corner that didn't get hit. I don't know what. Yeah, I put like no stock into it. Like, to me, I don't actually have a problem with a rookie biting on a double move in preseason. One, that's kind of where you want it to happen. Learn from it. I also don't mind you being kind of aggressive, trying to, make a play in a preseason game, which doesn't really matter as long as, you learn from it, bounce back, those types of things. I think even after that, he made a play later in that Jaguars game. I think he had a pass defense on like a curl. So like they tried to hit him with like, sell the vertical and then break down, and he still made a play on the curl, even though, so he wasn't even afraid of getting hit by the double move again. And I kind of like that confidence. So I still have pretty good faith in Cam Smith as a player. I know some people are a little more mixed, which is fine, but I think I was higher on him than probably most people when he came out of college. I was a big fan of his South Carolina film. Even like he was one of the first players I remember I watched before the previous draft ended, and I watched a few players for next year's draft, and Cam Smith was one of the first people I watched. So I knew about him for like a while in advance, so I was a big fan. And yeah. And then after that, we got Needham, versatility. Dolphins brought in Siren Neal from Buffalo, the Bills. He is going to be more, I feel like, has a really good shot of making the roster just strictly special teams because he's like a special teams stud. I think that's why you brought him in. So he makes the roster. He's going to be one of your main special teams players. He has some experience playing in the secondary in Buffalo and was mainly more of like a nickel guy. So maybe he ends up seeing some playing time. It wouldn't surprise me if he sees playing time this year at all. Like on defense, maybe, some snaps here or there. But definitely mostly as like a special teams guy. I don't have too strong of feelings on him as a player because I haven't seen enough as his defensive work. I've seen the special team stuff and he's really good, especially as like a gunner. So I feel, he'll make the team strictly off that. Yeah. And then obviously some other players. Then after that, that's kind of like the corners I'm expecting to like have a really good shot of making the roster, obviously. After that, you have like Ethan Bonner. And Bonner, I'm just doing the math, and I feel like I'm pretty 50-50 right now. Just like of guys that you're going to keep. I would keep Bonner. Bonner's one of the guys I would keep. He showed so much promise last season. I would even keep Bonner over someone like Needham. Obviously, if you can keep both, that's great. Depends how, things play out with injuries and stuff. That's kind of like where you usually cut it off with corners is around, depends how many safeties you keep too. Because sometimes you have a safety that plays corner as well, and you kind of have them in both groups. That's kind of why Needham is kind of in both groups. Bonner too. I think Bonner has some. But yeah, Bonner has, I think, some safety versatility too. If you go watch some of his Stanford film, I think there's something there to work with when it comes to his safety work. And he was making plays last year, man. Like, in the playoff game, he made some big plays, which was nice. He came in at the end of the Jets game and had like a pass deflection. Another, he was targeted again. It was incomplete. I think very good athlete. Obviously has that speed that we've seen Tyreek talk about, and he has good change of direction skills, some instincts. I think one of his biggest problems is some false steps. I think his footwork could be a little cleaner. He'll take false steps in transition, which I think hurts him, but he makes up for it with his athleticism. So definitely a guy you keep around and try to develop because there's definitely something to work there with. So I would be trying to keep him on the roster because to me, I feel like he would be more likely if you cut him, especially because last year he started out on the practice squad and then got elevated. But I feel like he showed some things during the season, and And the reason you got him on the practice squad is because he barely played in the preseason. I think he only played in preseason week 3. And looked solid, so they kept him on the practice squad, and they elevated him and looked solid. But like, I feel like he showed enough plays during like on his limited snaps that like if you did cut him, there is a chance I think he could get picked up somewhere else. But if not, if they are able to get him on the practice squad or the main roster, either way, I'd be doing a lot of work to keep Bonner, especially with like when you compare Bonner, who was a UDFA last year, to like this UDFA class. Like I'm looking at all these UDFAs in the secondary. Like Isaiah Johnson, Jordan Colbert, Mark Perry, Patrick McMorris, who's not a UDFA, but 6th round pick, Storm Duck, Jason Maitre, I'm not sure how to say his name. But I would keep Bonner over all of those people. And I think Bonner could play some corner safety stuff. So yeah, we'll see how that ends up working out. Assistant safety better make that team. I don't know much about him, so I'm hoping, but might be able to. But we could have added Boston College Art. Yeah, I agree, Michael. I was a big on adding. Wow, why am I? Yeah, it's not Montgomery. It's Christian Mahogany. That's who it is from Boston College. I was big on Mahogany. Apparently, Mahogany fell because of injury stuff, and I was like, because I thought Mahogany was like a 3rd round pick type player, but I would have been all down for. Like, I love the day 3 picks, but McMorris was the only one that I wasn't super excited about because I didn't really had seen much of him. And then when I watched film, I was like, okay, he is like a round 6, round 7 type of player. Didn't really move the needles for me. But when I look at the room right now, in the safety room, you have Holland, Poyer, May, locks to make the team, right? And then you have players like Nick Needham, who's like, do you have him in the safety room or the corner room? That kind of, makes a difference. And then you have Elijah Campbell, who's one of your better special teams players. So to me, it's like usually you don't keep more than that at the safety position. So I don't even know if McMorris will make the team. But I do think there is a chance McMorris could get to the practice squad if you end up cutting him. I think he's more than likely to get on the practice squad. I feel like that's where he's most likely to go right now. But even if they did cut him and then he went somewhere else, it wouldn't be one that bums me out too much. I thought McMorris on film was like he was an okay athlete, pretty smart player. Like he was a technically sound, smart player, did his job. I just feel like his athleticism was a little limited, that where like doesn't have like the highest ceiling. Like I feel like he could be like a depth safety in the NFL. I could see that, but not too much more. But yeah, okay. Who else? Yeah, those are like the main people to talk about pretty much. Storm Duck, cool name. A guy that I would like to see probably around on the practice squad out of like the corners, DBs. I feel like I'll just list all the UDFA DBs. I feel like Storm Duck and Mark Perry are the ones I would keep on the practice squad. Just I think they have the highest upside, and I think there's some stuff there to work with. With Duck, pretty actually instinctive player. Pretty exciting. I actually like some of his film. I just don't know. The only way they would actually make the roster, I think, is if there was a couple injuries that happened in training camp at other positions in front of them. Or they would really just have to shine. If they shined in preseason, then I could see the Dolphins be like, okay, we can't cut him because then he will get claimed. So then they would move on from someone else. But there's really not too many players at these positions they could move on from other than like a Needham, Because they're not going to cut Cam Smith. That would be crazy. They're not going to like Siren Neal. I don't think they're going to cut because he's special teams. Like the people have to outshine him in special teams, which I don't see happening. Who else is there? Like they're not going to cut Kohu. So there's just not enough spots for some of these UDFA guys. And then I would take Bonner over all of them anyways. Yeah. Yeah, any more questions? Got through. That's pretty much it. Like, because there's the other corners listed on here, like Isaiah Johnson. I think he was from Syracuse. I was not a fan of his film. I think he was big, tall, but like super stiff. Those types of players don't translate to the next level that well, in my opinion. And then the other one was Jason Maitre. He was the guy that he got added as UDFA after what's it called? He was one of like the camp ads. They signed him after that, so I still haven't really seen anything on him. And the other ones are all safeties. So, but I feel pretty good. Like I feel like they have one of the better corner duos in the league with Ramsey and Fuller. They have a pretty solid. They have a good safety duo as well, and then they have guys who can definitely play the nickel if needed across the board, and then they have a high upside number 3 corner in Cam Smith that is, if he does at least play slightly up to his potential, you feel really good about your corner room. I'm just excited for the season to start. Yeah. It's, oh yeah, okay. I was like a little confused. Okay. Yeah. How do you guys feel about, I mean, you ask me about anything. It can be about the DB room. It can be about pretty much anything Dolphins related, or just even NFL related. What position group haven't we done yet? I haven't done off-ball linebackers, so I will get to off-ball linebackers this week, running backs, and the quarterback room. I think that's all I have left. I did the safeties, corners now. I did edge, defensive tackles. I did the whole line, tight ends, receivers. So yeah, it's just off-ball linebackers, running backs, quarterbacks. And we'll do all of those before this training camp start, and then we'll continue doing, obviously still be posting breakdowns. And then when the season starts, I'll posting mostly breakdowns with some streams mixed in just to talk about stuff. Pretty good times. Feel like this is the best roster I've seen the Dolphins have in a very, very long time. Probably the best Dolphins roster I've seen in my lifetime. At least that I can remember. Across the board, very strong. Very few weaknesses too, and like pretty good depth at most positions. There's some positions I have questions about, but like most teams have more question marks. Okay. Yeah. I do want to say that I think out of like Ramsey and Holland, I think there's definitely enough there where they can get like, because there's not a lot of Kyle Hamilton like players in the league. Kyle Hamilton's so good. If you go watch his Baltimore film, that guy is doing it all. There's not many players in the league that can do what he does. I actually think Ramsey is one of the few in the league that can do what he does. And then I think Holland can also help with that. I don't think Holland's like, I think Holland has definitely has versatility. He doesn't have that level of versatility that Hamilton has to play that high of a level, but he can do some of those things mixed in with Ramsey doing it as well. Because I think there will be games where like, okay, we want Ramsey to like shadow their number 1, and their number 1's mostly an outside guy. So then we don't, move him around as much. So then Holland will have to do it certain games. But I think for the most part, you let Ramsey play down in the box, blitz him off the edge, have him line up as a safety the next snap, get him down, lined up over the nickel, man up on a tight end, and then, go on the outside the next play, play as a, zone corner, whatever it is. Like, he really is one of the few players in the league that can do it all. And this is the system to do it in, because it's one of the other few players in the league was doing it last year in the same system. So Ramsey, very important to this team's success this season. You have a bunch of edge players who can get pressure. You have Weaver working in the different schemes and stuff to get like the interior pressure, scheme that stuff up. And I think you have an upgraded linebacker group too, in coverage too, with adding Jordan Brooks, who can at least do some of the Roquan stuff potentially. So I feel better overall about the defense as a group. You have some question marks when it comes to like, okay, does Cam Smith step up? At edge, you're kind of worried about some injuries, but when you're healthy, you feel really good about that position. Defensive tackle, interior, like you're worried that you lost Wilkins, but you added a lot of depth to that position, so you have at least more bodies to rotate in now. And I feel at least confident that Weaver can get good production out of that position, even without the most talent. And then offense, I just feel like offense, you didn't really you just upgraded pretty much at most offensive spots. Like interior O-line was, I think right guard is really the only position you declined at, but everywhere else, like you upgraded at tight end, you got another stud in the running back room. You have more guys in the receiving room that are better. So feel pretty good across the board about the improvements the team's made. Signed on late, but curious as do you see more playing time this season at Bonner? Yeah, I'm a big fan of both Cam Smith and Bonner, so I'm hoping they both, I'm saying Cam Smith because I really think Cam Smith is just going to get the first shot at the job, and I am confident in him as a player that he'll get win that third corner job. So to me, I would say Cam Smith gets more playing time. I will say Bonner's probably more versatile to play multiple different spots though, and play safety, and he'll probably be. I think he's even a better special teams player. So I think Bonner will make an impact on special teams, and we'll see some playing time at some point. But Cam Smith, I think, will get more playing time. One, because I think draft capital is it's just a big part of the politics of the game. So even if Bonner was outperforming him, I think Cam Smith would still get the first shot. But I do think I still have pretty good faith in him. So it's kind of how I see it playing out. But I like both players. But yeah, pretty much talked about all the corners, at least the ones that will be around. Everyone that I've watched. I mean, this is everyone listed on our lads is Kendall Fuller, Jalen Ramsey, Kader Kohu, Cam Smith. Nick Needham is listed as a corner here, but he's kind of in the corner safety room. Cyron Neal, special teams guy. Ethan Bonner. Those are the guys I expect to really actually stick around. Maybe potentially one of those guys ends up on the practice squad, but they end up getting elevated a lot. So anyways. And then everyone else is kind of a UDFA that I don't really think will stick around. But I could see some of the safeties sticking around on the practice squad. But yeah. I think it's a tough year. In the past, the Dolphins have actually had UDFAs make a pretty big impact and usually have a couple make the teams. I don't think this is the best year for UDFAs because the Dolphins roster is pretty deep. There's not a lot of spots for them to really challenge. I think only a couple of them have a chance. And you never know with injuries, though. Injuries can change that. If there's an injury, I could see it happening. That's why I would say Grayson Murphy, the edge from UCLA, probably, one, I think he's the best UDFA, and I think he has the best chance of making the roster because you don't know if Chubb and Phillips are going to be ready for the start of the season, which would give him the best chance, I think, to actually make the roster initially. But I also think if you make the practice squad, you could still make an impact on the Dolphins this year because I think you can with the new rule, I'm pretty sure you can in the past you could only elevate 3 times, and once you elevated 3 times, you either had to add them to the roster or cut them basically from the practice squad. So I think once I think if you're on the UD practice squad players make it at least a few of them make an impact every year. Okay, unless you guys have any more questions. Oh, I went full screen. Let me go back there. Okay. So unless you guys have any more questions, probably we'll sign off. Keep it, nice 30-minute stream. I'm gonna have a film breakdown tomorrow on Channing Tindall. Will be an interesting one because obviously not a lot of film on Tindall, but I just he played a few snaps last year during the regular season, which I got those, and then I got some of the preseason stuff. But the video will be about Tindall, and this is kind of his last chance, I think, to really prove himself because that third year is kind of a development period for these players. Because I don't even think he's a lock to make the team. So we'll see how it ends up playing out. Because we'll talk about his strengths, his weaknesses, and how it ended up playing out. Oh yeah. Okay. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys next time.